And it's lights out. Welcome to the Pitwall Saudi Arabia Grand Prix Edition podcast. Joining me this evening is my father, Dr. David Kessler. I'm your host, Jeanmark, and let's go. The unthinkable, the unimaginable, the most epic conclusion finale has taken place. We have, with one race to go, Hamilton and Verstappen tied on championship points. I don't care about anybody else's constructor standings or driver standings. It all comes down to who's going to lift up that championship trophy. Dad, it seems like the momentum has been overwhelmingly Hamilton's. If they tie, which means that they would have to get out of the points or crash out, then Verstappen win on count back, but otherwise whoever finishes ahead of the other one in this race wins the championship. So Dad, who do you think is going to pull it out?
So when you said count back, that means that Verstappen has one more win, so then he would actually win if they tied again.
Correct.
Or if they both got knocked out. I can tell you what I want to happen. I want Verstappen to win. He's going against a very savvy, experienced driver whose car seems to be at its peak right now. So he's going to have his hands full keeping Hamilton behind him or getting ahead of him. And previously, we have seen them use pit strategies to do that. And if this is a course pit strategy is strong in, then I still like Verstappen's chances.
So you're saying that if there's a variability of pit strategy, Red Bull usually gets advantage of that. That's what we saw this last race. Because of some of that pit tire stuff, it seemed like he was going to get the advantage. Hamilton got ahead of him at the restart, or he would have stayed with the hards the whole time. Going in this race, if it's just not a clear-cut one-stop strategy, then Verstappen could try to get a good undercut.
And a slower track usually does do better for Verstappen. He's better in cornering, better at overtaking, other than at the DRS places. I like his chances.
As I've been saying this whole season, Imola, where Hamilton should have DNF'd but did it, and then the red flag allowed him to unlap himself, which got him second place. Huge for Hamilton. And then second, Silverstone. Those two really made the difference this season. Going down to being even, I feel like there's so much pressure on, like you said, who gets out in front. And then once the guy's out front, because this is not like this race where you have walls and crashes, can you pull out the lead? Because what Verstappen was trying to do, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but what the team was trying to do was get pole position, which he would have had if he hadn't a crash. It was the most epic pole position try. Once you get pole, you have 2 laps to build more than a second gap. And once Verstappen's able to build more than a second gap, then he doesn't have to worry about Hamilton's DRS. And that's what they have to do at Abu Dhabi. He has to get on pole, and if he's not on pole, he has to get past Hamilton in turn 1. But that's really hard to do because Hamilton's had amazing launches. So pretty much he has to get on pole, he has to get away clean, and then he has to pull out the gap before the DRS range opens so that Hamilton can't just get past him. Because that's what we saw this race. Hamilton was right outside DRS range, then he was able to nurse his tires a little bit, he was able to manage some ERS, and then boom, he's right there passing Verstappen with his big long DRS wing open.
So I have a question for you. What percentage would you give Verstappen versus Hamilton? Not what you want to happen.
Well, Hamilton has won 3 of the last 4 races. At the beginning of the season, Hamilton with a brand new engine won 3 out of 4 races. And the only reason that he lost Imola to Verstappen is because it was wet. We're not having a wet race here, and Verstappen really doesn't have a chance to win this championship.
So what percentage is that?
Technically, Verstappen has a 0% chance of winning this championship. That's the problem of how powerful Mercedes' new engine is. The only chance that I would give Verstappen that Hamilton would lose is if Hamilton's engine suddenly blows up on him because it was tuned to be for 4 races. The problem is this is race number 3, so it's not in danger of blowing up. As much as Verstappen could try to outdrive Hamilton, Hamilton's car is just so much better on the straights. So how does he pull away? It's really no chance that Verstappen can beat Hamilton unless, like we said earlier, he's able to get ahead and build the gap. Last season, Verstappen blew Hamilton and Bottas out of the water at Abu Dhabi. But there was 2 things. The first track, it had the old layout. Like you said, it favored the Red Bull because you couldn't overtake in the DRS zones because you had these heavy braking zones. Now they're medium fast corners, which means Mercedes even has a bigger advantage because they don't have these heavy corners that would now favor the Red Bull. They can just zoom around the track. And then 2, Hamilton, Bottas had already wrapped up both championships, so there was no reason for Mercedes to change an engine, give them more power. Well, this time around, Hamilton's going to have really powerful engine going into it. Okay, I know I said a 0% chance, but I think that Verstappen should, because he's tied with Hamilton, should be given the benefit of the doubt and have a 50-50% chance.
Sounds good to me. However, if I had to put my emotions aside, I would say that Hamilton has probably an 85% chance and Verstappen 15. The 15 based on he owes the tiebreak, and usually they have a better pit strategy. Those are the two saving things, and he's a really good driver. Each of those get 5%, but the car itself, and now that the Abu Dhabi is a faster track than it was last year, makes me think that he's going to have his work cut out for him, and I will be happy if he wins, but I'm not going to be surprised if he doesn't.
Well, put it in the comments below. What percentage do you give Verstappen? What percentage do you give Hamilton? And who do you think is going to pull it out? Who do you think is going to win this championship?
Can you make a poll on that?
We'll just do it in the comments below. If I do a poll, it'll probably be on Twitter.
Oh,
here's a plug. Follow us on Twitter at Ralsick Racing. It'll show up as the Pitwall. I will probably, indubitably, put a poll on Twitter. It's like what I do because I want to hear from you. As much as happened during that race, I would just have to summarize it in this one little message I gave to our group during the race. I said, while we didn't have Singapore this season, Jeddah fits the late season, street circuit, night race with chaos that F1 looks for. And that's what we got. Chaos. The heat so much. Did you see Hamilton? He was like out of breath at the end of the race. He was just like, ugh. So yeah, this was taxing. It was fast. It was wall-to-wall action. Okay, what would you rate it, Dad? From all the races that we had this season, do you consider it a top 5, bottom 5, somewhere in the middle?
Your mom hated it.
Really? Mom watched it.
Too much stop and go and crashes and dirt all over the track, and she was not a happy camper.
Alonso was getting on the radio being like, there's just way too much debris everywhere. And I thought it was funny that the cameras were showing all the debris and it took like 10 minutes before anyone picked them up. I was like, how do you see the debris before the guys go get the debris? But anyways.
She didn't like the fact that it had to be restarted twice from a standing point too. She's not much of a fan of that either. I kind of liked on the second standing start that Verstappen went inside and took the lead. That was pretty amazing.
That was a great move. And that's one of the benefits of a standing start is because there's so many different ways to do it. That was cool to see the different approaches each driver had. Pole position was not where you wanted to be apparently on that track because even though it was the dirty side of the grid, P2 often was able to shove the pole position out in that corner. And they said, oh, you're leaving the track and getting, what? You're putting your car in a place and out-braking guy in first place, but whatever.
Red Bull at that second put on medium tires thinking maybe that it would have slightly better pace and they might stay ahead of Hamilton because if they both had hard tires, maybe they thought that Hamilton would catch him sooner. However, by the end of the race, the tires had worn down, so he probably would have passed him just by the tires going down.
Here's what I think their strategy was. You knew you couldn't pass Hamilton because he already passed you with hards at the start. So then it says, we need to get off the line quicker because we're now in third. So put on the mediums, which is what he did. He was able to outbrake and get past them, right? Then, can you build a lead? Hamilton was just way too fast with those hards. But then the strategy is you build the lead, you force Hamilton to chase you because at the beginning of the race, Hamilton was, Bottas was getting on the radio saying he needs to go faster, right? Hamilton had too much pace in hand. So you force him to go forward. So now you build a gap in the case that if Hamilton's going to pass you, you can pit, take the fastest lap. The problem is his penalties caused him to not be able to pit because then he would have been overtaken by Ocon or even Bottas. So like you said, here they are trying to use their strategy. And then also the tires started going off, but then Verstappen also lost the will to fight. When he got all those penalties, there was no way to beat Hamilton. Why push the car and get a crash? Or why push the car and wear down the engine where you have to have it for next race? Imagine if Perez had not have pitted like Verstappen did, and then Perez was near the front to help fight off Bottas or fight off Hamilton. That would have been interesting. Hopefully at Abu Dhabi, Verstappen is able to get a teammate to help out. Let's just think about this. Bahrain. Perez was able to block Hamilton for pretty much the whole race. Then in Brazil, yes, Hamilton did catch Max Verstappen, but Perez was there to block, to slow him down. And that is maybe the hope that Verstappen could have, is not only if he's able to qualify high, can he get Perez somewhere in there to force Hamilton to do a different type of pit strategy? And hopefully that would end up being the case. But in this race, like you said, there was way so much stop and go, debris everywhere, everyone was crashing. So Mom didn't like it, but what about you?
I was intrigued by the different strategies that they were taking with the red flag and stopping and then changing strategies there. Verstappen seemed to have the advantage when he got tires without having to take extra time off. But that really hurt Perez because he'd already came in, lost positions because other people didn't pit. And so he was in the fray of a crash. So that didn't help Red Bull. Kind of helped, it kind of hurt. I thought it was interesting that Mercedes as a team has won every first race on a new track in the hybrid series.
Not Zandvoort. Verstappen won that.
The first time it was done?
Yeah, at Netherlands. I know they keep throwing out that stat. Hamilton, he got on pole position and he wins the race. Now he's guaranteed the champion. But then you forget that Verstappen won at Zandvoort, which was a brand new track.
Now, when we're talking about it, Toto Wolff said that these are Titans fighting for the title, and he would not be surprised if there might be a crash because both of them are going to be going full steam ahead. So,
well, okay, here's the reason he would say that. If you look at history, just look at 1994. Michael Schumacher was with Benetton. Ayrton Senna had passed away at Imola, and then Damon Hill was his main competitor going in the last race. If they crashed, Schumacher would win. That's what happened. Schumacher went around a corner, got a little bit off, and then suddenly Damon Hill was right in his gearbox on the right, contact, and it flipped Schumacher and bent Damon Hill's suspension. So they were out. Then Williams, realizing what happened to Damon Hill when Jacques Villeneuve in 97 was in a similar situation with Schumacher. They played it up week after week after week leading up to the race. Schumacher did it once. He's going to do it again. There's going to be a crash. There's going to be a crash. And so I think Toto Wolff is doing a similar thing to say, if we lose, it's not our fault. It's because Verstappen caused a crash. To get public will against Verstappen, to get the stewards to be more likely to give a penalty. Because let's say they have a crash, but they don't DNF. Well, then Hamilton's going to win because Verstappen's going to get a penalty. He either has to cleanly beat Hamilton or he has to DNF them both and hope that it's not a severe enough penalty that it keeps him from the championship.
The stewards were going to have Verstappen come. I hadn't heard anything about that. Had you heard?
Oh, after the race, yeah, he got a 10-second penalty for the incident where he slowed down. It didn't cause him to lose second place, but he did get 2 points on his license.
So he got both the 5 and another 10, or the 5 turned into 10?
No, he got 15 total.
15. Wow.
Yeah. And so
they were saying that he brake checked him.
No, they didn't say he brake checked him. What they said was he drove slow, which caused an accident. So according to the FIA's sporting regulations, you can get penalized for driving dangerously in an uncontrolled manner or unnecessarily slow. He was on a straight and he was driving so slow that it caused a crash. Now, in the document, it said that Hamilton was unaware about giving back the position. And so his argument is, this guy was slowing down. I didn't know if he was crashed. I didn't know if he was breaking down. I didn't know any of these things. So with the information they had at the time, that's why Verstappen got in trouble. If Hamilton knew, and that's why there was that whole mess with Mercedes saying, well, you told us, but if Hamilton knew, then it's why did Hamilton slow down? That's what everyone's wondering is why did Hamilton slow down? A car's slowing down. Why don't you just pass him? But that's because Verstappen, even though originally he was on the right side of the road and was slowing down, he kind of went back towards the middle again. I think Hamilton was really trying to figure out what was going on.
And he went too slow. He didn't slow down just a little to let someone pass at full speed. He slowed down too slow, is what they're saying. He went way too slow compared to just going down a little and letting someone pass you.
Right. That was the argumentation of the document, yeah.
And this sets him up also, Toto Wolff, for this next race. Saying basically, we've already established that he's not driving really well and he's getting penalties. So if something bad happens this next race, then,
Exactly, which goes back to Williams' story. Jacques Villeneuve was saying it, and guess what happened during the race? He and Schumacher crashed. But Schumacher DNF'd, and Villeneuve's car was not fully damaged enough, and he was able to finish the race. And so he won the championship.
But who crashed into whom in that time?
The general historical audience says that Schumacher was responsible for both crashes.
Okay.
Which is why, even though he's a really great driver, when you hear people saying he was a dirty driver, they always refer to those two instances. The championship was on the ropes. Schumacher makes a mistake or puts his car in a position that creates an incident on the last race. That's usually the asterisk. And that's why I think people are trying to paint that picture of Verstappen. We know he's aggressive. And Hamilton, knowing he's aggressive, has to make a decision. We saw Hamilton got a black and white flag for shoving Verstappen off the road. If people are claiming Hamilton is driving... No. Hamilton's doing the same. He's just doing it in a little bit more sneaky way. And that's why he isn't getting penalties like Verstappen. You have to remember, as much as people try to say it's Verstappen's fault for Silverstone, Silverstone, Verstappen didn't get a penalty. Hamilton did. And he didn't just get a penalty, he got a 10-second penalty, which meant that they believed it was Hamilton's fault. So Hamilton can cause crashes. And that's why I believe that if Hamilton wins the championship, Silverstone will always be there. Now, if some people could say if Verstappen wins the championship and they crash, then they'll put an asterisk there. And that's why it's, like you said, Toto Wolff is putting this pressure. He's trying to prime the stewards up to say, hey, you really got to watch Verstappen. He's going to cause an accident. He's going to cause a problem. It doesn't benefit Hamilton to get a crash unless he thinks that he can survive and force Verstappen to a penalty. Otherwise, there's no reason for Hamilton to crash.
Yeah, if Hamilton can squeeze him into a wall, then that benefits him.
Last time Hamilton was in this position was in 2016, and he disobeyed team orders and was backing up the field in Abu Dhabi to try to get cars to pass Nico Rosberg. So Hamilton will do the same thing. Like this race, there was that weird nuance about can you actually have the greater than 10 car lengths on the formation lap? Well, it wasn't a formation lap because it was a restart, and Hamilton was really trying to slow down Verstappen warming his tires. And so Hamilton, he's sneaky, he does his things. But you can't just say that one guy's always crash-stapping, which I want to do a research. People claim that Verstappen is crash-stapping. I want to look at, throughout the season, all the crashes and incidents that happen and count for every driver. How many incidents were they in? How many crashes were they in? Because I think the reason why Hamilton is not perceived to be a crash guy is because he's always in front. If you're in the front, you get blue flags, you never crash. But when you have a guy you're actually racing with, that's why you have people crash. Like, for example, Vettel and Raikkonen. Did you see them go... and they like crash into each other? It's like, okay, people who actually race each other will crash. It's inevitable. Just because you're the best driver in the world doesn't mean that you're not going to have contact. And that's what we saw with Verstappen and Hamilton. Wow, this race reaction turned into us ranting about how good of a driver you should be and who's going to get contact. Any closing remarks on the race? Do you think that they should change anything about the racetrack?
No, I'm just excited that they're tied going to the end. They both have a chance now. One last race, and for the drivers themselves to be at their peak and at their best, it'll be an exciting race.
It's now time for our heroes and zeros. I don't know why it took me an entire season before I realized we should ask you, who are your heroes and zeros? Put in the comments below, who is your hero, who is your zero for this race, Saudi Arabia, and tell us why. Last race at Qatar. Samir Sandhu, he said, Alonso is my hero for getting back on the podium, and Bottas is my zero because every time I choose him, he flops. And only to podium the very next race when I take him off my team. If he podiums this weekend after I took him off again, I may start going into conspiracy theories. And what happens? At the line, drag race, Bottas passes Ocon and gets on the podium. Oof. Oh, man. Well, we're going to put a link in the description below. We have polls where you can vote on your heroes and zeros for this coming race. I think some people voted on who their hero and zero was for the last race. No, these are for the coming race. Links in the description below. Hit those polls. We will look into that for next race. Now looking at our projections. This is another cool idea. So Dad, you projected that Perez would be your hero and that Leclerc would crash. Well, I think you were partly correct, weren't you?
Yeah, Leclerc didn't crash, but he crashed my Perez, which was going to be my hero, but he couldn't be my hero after he was shoved off by Leclerc. So he's my zero. My hero is Ocon. I just didn't expect him to be in competition for the third place on the podium. It was sad to me that Bottas got him in the last base there. I thought Ocon did a great job.
For me, I didn't do any projections, but Dominic had projected Alonso as a hero. He got in trouble. He had some mistakes. Paolo had projected Bottas to be a hero. I guess he did. If I remember correctly, you said Perez was going to help Verstappen win, but Bottas was going to help Hamilton win, is what Paolo said. And until the first red flag, Bottas was helping Hamilton win. Not only was he helping Hamilton win, I don't know if Verstappen would have got past him easily unless he did an undercut. So Bottas was doing a good job. And then she was going to have Vettel as the crash. Yep, Vettel had some mistakes. Now to me, my heroes and zeros. Ricardo is my hero. Stay cool, calm, collected. He didn't really have a good performance leading up to the race, but then he was able to pull it out and do a good result. Norris, on the other hand, he tried the alternate strategy starting on softs, and he was livid after the race because his tire strategy worked to perfection, but because he had to pit or decided to pit because of the safety car, then everyone else got a free pit stop because of the red flag, and now he's back down to back of the pack. It's very frustrating. Norris was so good at the beginning of the season, and as it progressed, other cars have been able to just get a hold or get better than him. I feel sorry for Norris.
I think one reason he was doing real well at the beginning was that there were several veteran drivers that were getting used to and once they got used to the newer cars, they were able to perform better, which kind of shoved him down.
So you're saying because at the beginning of the season, he was in a car he had already been familiar with, he had that advantage. Good point. Now to our heroes and zeros projections. Dad, who do you think is going to be your hero for next race?
I'm going to go emotionally here. My hero is going to be Verstappen.
Okay, tell me why.
Because I'm hoping he wins a championship. He may let me down, but I just think that would be the wonderful end of a Cinderella story.
Okay.
Because up until this year, there have been no constructors that could catch Mercedes. And for Red Bull to be in competition last race is amazing.
I kind of want to pick the same, but at the same time, I'm not. At Abu Dhabi, last season, Verstappen got pole position, followed by Bottas, Hamilton, Norris, Albon, and the Red Bull. The race results, Verstappen won, followed by Bottas, followed by Hamilton, followed by Albon, followed by Norris. Okay. Either Norris is going to show up and be amazing or Perez is. So I'm going to put it between either Perez or Norris as my potential hero. I hope that Norris is able to put something together and have a really good showing, or that Perez is able to do it. So I'm going to put it as either Perez or Norris. We'll see.
It would be a nice finish to the race year for Norris if he could actually podium.
Well, I don't think there's any chance he can podium.
I don't know. After this last race and all the crashes, I wouldn't say there's no chance. I mean,
yeah, but
Ocon
Abu Dhabi does not crash. The only way there would be a crash is if Hamilton Verstappen crash, in my opinion, right? That's the only way that he could get on the podium. If he's not crashing, Verstappen, Hamilton will be on the podium. Then that means Bottas will probably be the third guy, unless Perez beats him somehow. Yeah. So for Norris to get on the podium, you literally have to have 2 of the 4 guys off. But that would be amazing. If Norris could finish on the podium, that would be solid. Solid indeed. Okay, guys, tell us, who are your projected heroes and zeros? Who do you think will be a hero, and who do you think will end up being a zero for this coming race? Put in the comments below. It's now time for It's in the Numbers. Last week, our numbers were 6.175, 12, and 7. Thank you, Kesko. You got it again. It was the 3 features of the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. The first referring to the length of the track, the second being the degrees of banking on the 13th corner, which is a hairpin, and the amount of grandstands at that locale. Now, Dad, share with us this week's It's in the Numbers.
This week, it's 9, 242.125, and 12. The name, the driver, the hint, Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. If you can figure it out and want to share it, able to give you a shout out.
As we look forward to the final race of this season, we want to take this opportunity to share our last lineup projections and potential day trading opportunities for our Fantasy Formula 1 teams. Dad, share with us your lineup.
My lineup is Verstappen, Russell, Perez, Gasly, Sainz, and Red Bull. I was not too happy with the result of the race, and with this team I thought was going to do a good job, and Perez and Russell got knocked out. I think it's a solid lineup. I have to decide whether or not to go with Leclerc instead of Sainz. I went with Sainz this time because he had the quality streak, which he missed anyways. He scored in the end 1 point more. I don't think Russell will in another crash. I'm just a little curious about Verstappen. Verstappen's going to probably be aggressive, and if they crash out together, he wins. But if he crashes out, no points for me. So I have to decide whether or not to go with Verstappen on this last race or go with a safer thing like Bottas, because Hamilton nor Verstappen is going to mess with Bottas probably.
Well, here's a question. Would Hamilton allow a crash to happen?
He was a big loser if he does. He probably won't punt like Silverstone because he got lucky that he didn't get out too. You know, he got the back tire. If he had hit him a little on either side, he might have hurt his car. Hamilton to win was going to have to race a savvy, clean race. And understanding that Verstappen is an aggressive driver, he's going to have to pick his DRS zones.
But here's the thing. Do you think Hamilton's going to try to do like this race where he's going to try to get Verstappen to get penalties? It worked this race, and he might do that again. He knows that Verstappen's aggressive, so he'll kind of put him in a situation that would force Verstappen to commit a penalty to defend against him.
That's true, but if he pushes too hard, Verstappen could actually take them both out. So he's got to be careful about pushing too hard.
I would probably still go with Verstappen or Hamilton because, like, what's the other alternative? I go, Perez, Bottas, Bottas, Leclerc, Sainz, Gasly. If you're going to not have the two most expensive drivers, you better have better drivers or a better constructor to balance it out, right?
Yeah, and then if you think that those two are going to potentially tangle, then you wouldn't use Red Bull or Mercedes constructors. So then you're stuck with either Ferrari or McLaren.
And they're not
Which one do you trust of those? All I can do is stick with a solid lineup and hope they don't crash out.
Man, put in the comments below. Do you think that Hamilton Verstappen are going to cost you a chance at winning your Formula One fantasy league? Man, that's going to be tough. Actually, that reminds me of that comment we read earlier about Bottas being so inconsistent. Which brings us to my lineup. On the left, I have my team that's been consistent trading throughout the season. The second one's my day trading team, which I haven't been day trading these last couple weeks because I didn't feel like there's any point with only 3 races left. I want to be able to get maximum points. I was able to pick up Tsunoda instead of Russell. It was like pick your poison because Tsunoda still got negative points. But then between Sainz and Leclerc, and that ended up being a 1-point difference. And so, yeah, it was tricky, this whole lineup. I almost went with Bottas instead of Perez, and that would have ended up giving me a lot of points. But how was I supposed to know? After the first pit stop, Perez was in a bad sort, and that was because he pit and then got back in the pack. They all had the crash. If that hadn't happened with Mick Schumacher crashing, then I don't think we would have had that big crash. Abu Dhabi should not have big crashes. Abu Dhabi is going to be a much safer race unless people crash into the first corner, but there's runoff areas, so people don't really crash. They push each other wide. So they've also smoothed out some of the corners. I don't think there should be any major crashes in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, let me know who you thinking for these lineups. It's really hard to pick something else because we have our team value. We're not really day trading because we want to be able to make our substitutions because we've already used our wild card and we've already used mega drivers. So it all comes down to the minimal fine margins and maybe one driver making the difference between you getting the points you need to overcome everyone else in your league. This now brings us to highlight, to put a spotlight on our season-long Pitwall League. The league code in the description of every single Fantasy Formula One video this whole season, and it has been an opportunity for people to see how other people are performing over the course of the season. We have 288 teams. It comes down to one last race, and so we would like to highlight with you our top positions. These people are all within striking distance of getting to the end on top. First, we have Prachi S. He has some really good lineup. He only had his turbo drive of negative 12 points with Perez. Everyone else was positive. Ocon was a good nab on his team. Selassie, very similar lineup, but he had Norris. Andy Z. He had Russell, but he had both of the Ferraris. That was a good pickup. Mika S. He had Tsunoda like me, picking up that guy. Damage limitations compared to having someone like Russell, who would have got you a lot more. Raul S. He also picked up Ocon. Very nice grab. Lucas T. Very similar. He had the Ocon. Ocon made the difference. And then Ward V. So he had Perez and Russell, but he turboed Leclerc. That was a good call. And then number 8, turboing Sainz, but he had Schumacher, but turboing Sainz, and he had Mercedes. That was a good call for him to be able to get no big losses because he picked the right guy, the turbo, and he picked a better constructor, not having the problem of Perez at all on his team. I'm highlighting these 8 because they're all within striking distance, all within about a 27-point differential to being on top. Good on y'all. Any trends that you noticed, Dad, for these people who've been able to score over 4,100 points over the course of the season?
I did notice that 2 of the top 5 are the season-long league are from India. So great for India.
Well, let's take this opportunity to look over the top 10 in our league and see the countries represented there. You just have to hover over the flag and it'll pop up and tell you India, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the United States, Canada, India, Sweden, Belgium, Canada, Brazil, and Canada. And popping out in 11th, here he is, a little United Kingdom. We don't normally give shout out to the people in the season-long league. That might be something I'll switch up for next season. It's because the focus of the season-long league is so you can check everyone to see how they've been performing and compare lineups, whereas the ORC or the One Race Challenge is our competitive environment.
Now, near the end of the year, we definitely want to appreciate these top 8 who are bringing up the averages of the season-long league. So we've maintained being in the top 3. That's great.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. It takes all 288 of you to help out. If you go over to summary and you scroll down, you will see that there we are. Average points by large leagues. 3,660 points, 0.62. There we are, third place. I didn't notice this. Look at this dad on the left. Average points by medium league. Our Portugal Grand Prix one race challenge is 4th for most points. That's amazing. That's pretty cool. So good on y'all for staying on for our leagues. That's amazing. I never noticed that till right now. Pitwall has a representation on both leaderboards. In order to understand how crazy this weekend is, we got to look at our one race challenge, our ORC, the Elite, Verstappen, Gasly, Ocon having to turbo him. That would have been a haul of points. 66, Giovinazzi, Latifi, and who would have picked Latifi over Russell? No one ever does that. And then, of course, Mercedes instead of having Red Bull. And that would have got a total of 217 points with just a budget of 99.3.
It's almost like they knew there were going to be crashes or something. The computer just knew it.
It's almost like they knew mayhem was coming, but that's the advantage of the ORC Elite because we get to pick the best after it happens. So let's see how we all did for our one race challenge, our ORC leaderboard. Round 21, the penultimate round with 183 points. Wow. Good on you, James. Then we had a tie for silver between Kim V and Jason P. Kim V, this is the first podium in the entire season. So congratulations, getting on there. For our bronze, Ward V and Flores S, which gives the fat stacks to Flores with 109.7 million because you tied but had the highest team value. This now updates our ORC leaderboard. Uso K, 108. Dad, or David K, with 103. Matthew C, with 95. Gia, with 94. Ward V, with that bronze, has now got from 8th place to a 5th place spot with 91. And realistically, statistically, these 5 are able, within striking distance, to take the championship next race weekend. Dad, how do you feel like it being in the top 5 running 5-way battle for the last race?
I'm excited. I think it's cool that there's a person represent different countries, Finland, US, Canada, Italy, and Belgium. And I think we should have a special podium ceremony for the ORC leaderboard like we do at the end of the race. How's that sound?
So you're saying a season-ending podium ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like an idea. Have to stay tuned for that podcast when that drops. We do want to give a shout out to Raul S. because you are P5 in our season-long league, but you're ranked 12th in the ORC. And it goes to show how you can be consistent over the course of a whole season, but picking the right team for one race week where there's highs and lows can be quite difficult. Or Prachi S, who is our number 1 in the season-long league, is ranked 14th in the one race challenge. You guys do good keeping us in the season-long league, and hopefully you've had fun challenging other people in the one race challenge with the different format for points. Looking at our Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, the podium places. James, he was on Twitter. He's like, I got on the podium. Yes. Congratulations. I appreciate you are one of the cool guys on Twitter that gets a lot of good conversation. It's great to see you getting that gold. Picking Sainz as your turbo, Leclerc as the wingman, Ocon to round it out, Verstappen and Gasly, and the only one that let you down was Red Bull, but you still got enough points to get 183, so good on ya. Good choice. Looking at our 2 silver places, Jason having a very similar. The main difference was he had Norris, who looked good until the red flag, and then giving everyone that free tire ended up sending him back down the order. He was not happy about that after the race. Kim V, you also picked Norris. Your lineup looks very similar and ended up with the tie. Now to our bronze, Ward V. Having Bottas, the lineup I should have gone with. Good on you for also picking up Ocon. And even though Russell let you down, that was where your budget could help. And by turboing Gasly, good choice. Good choice indeed. And then to Flores, having Hamilton and Verstappen. I was tempted to do a Hamilton, Verstappen, Alpine lineup. Alpine got an okay amount of points, and Hamilton could have gotten the differential because Hamilton scored more points than Red Bull did as a constructor. But the question is, was it enough of a margin to justify his cost? But look, he minimized negative points by only having Tsunoda as the guy who lost points. So good on you guys for the great podium performances and the picks that you had. But now as we go down to our meme team, that is a shout out to Kevin V versus Suddenly Stappen. So Dad, how did you feel about suddenly Stappen or Max Verstappen suddenly stopping on track?
That was really interesting. And reviewing that whole thing, Hamilton thought he might be brake checking him. However, he never went around. So he was trying to slow down probably for the DRS. Hamilton didn't get the news from the right sources to know that he was getting a pass. It was just a sad thing. If Verstappen had not sped off and had still hung out and let Hamilton go by, then he wouldn't have gotten that penalty.
Also, I think Verstappen was being sneaky because there's a rule that states that when you give a position place back, you can't immediately take it over, which he tried to do during the race, right? He slowed down so that he would pass him. Then he got the detection zone for the DRS and then zoomed past him into the next corner. And so
I didn't realize there was a rule saying you couldn't do that.
Yeah, if I am ordering you to give a position back, you need to give it back. You can't give it back and then immediately take it back again. And usually the rule's enforced because of that DRS. Some guy will give a position and then immediately use DRS to get it back. It's not like you actually gave it. It's like, keepies. And I would like to promo for you our very last one race challenge, the ORC for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It's where it all is at. Code is in the description below. Once we get 10 entrants, I'm able to make a custom graphic. I love making those. And I look forward to seeing everyone who's able to join us and seeing the epicness that will unfold. There are two rules to keep in mind. The first is that we do not calculate beyond the base. So if you get Mega Driver points, we will only take the base points. Most people have already used a Mega Driver, but it's good to remember that. And then second, and this only applies to the podium. If you are tied on points, tiebreak goes to the lowest team value. So if you are getting a gold and the other person has the exact same amount of points, but you have less team value, you get the higher step. If you get on the top 3, you get a special podium ceremony at the end of our next podcast reaction. And if you're on the top set, we get to hear your national anthem.
And we've heard several different ones this year. It's pretty amazing.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for joining us in our penultimate race podcast for the 2021 season. Thank you, Dad, for joining me this evening. And I've been your host, Jeanmark. And until next time, we'll see you on the pit wall.